could you just tell us a little bit about the background you have with marketing and what your career up until this point has been?
Sure. My career has been very focused on multi-unit businesses, starting with food service, so QSR, restaurants, and then moving into food retailing, grocery chains, and then soft lines, hard lines, pet. So pretty much any kind of retail you can think of, I've been doing. And as part of that growth over the many years of my career, I've also instituted a lot of e-commerce and omni-channel approaches for retailers and for franchise businesses.
I love that. And now you are doing your own thing, doing some consulting with businesses.
Correct. So I've had my own marketing consulting and fractional CMO business since 2016, kind of off and on. And I started it up again in 2021. I've worked with a variety of clients in that time, a mental health care startup, regional lawn care and pet care service, and some other small projects as well. So the work is really fun. It's always interesting because you're doing new things, different things every day. And I really enjoy that part.
I love that. And, I think with your extensive background and what you're currently doing, there's a good bit of things that we could unpack and just kind of talk through thinking about, the different roles that you've had. And then you're currently doing your own thing where you're working with various clients, right? When you go into a CMO role, when you go into a marketing role where you're making decisions, what are the first one or two things that you're really looking for to understand about the business?
Well, the first thing I want to understand is, how does the business make money? I think all too often people think marketers make really pretty creative, and that's all we do. But I think the best marketers are the ones who understand the business and understand it holistically. How do we drive sales? What's important? How do you make money? Where are the pressure points in the P&L? And then understanding what the goals and objectives for the business are, short-term and long-term. Those are two really critical things that are going to help me, at least, understand how we need to position marketing as a function in the organization, what we're responsible for, and then how do we structure that and make sure we can get all of the work done that's going to need to be done.
And could you maybe elaborate on that first point a little bit, how the business makes money? So, I think from a very simple view, it could be, well, we sell products, right? But from a brick and mortar perspective, could you maybe give an example of like a time where you've had to go in and kind of assess how the business makes money and then use that to determine how you're going to be doing marketing?
Sure. So grocery businesses are a great example. Many, I wouldn't say all, but many grocery businesses are still very focused on weekly promotional products, advertising. And when you go in and you start to look at a grocery P&L, what you see typically is really great high sales. And that's amazing. That's a great thing. And you can look at when you drop ads and you can see what happens with those ads. Transactions typically go up. Hopefully you also see sales go up. But what you also see in that kind of a P&L, and this is just an example, is that you need to remove all those promotional discounts from your gross revenue to come to a net revenue, because that's really where you're going to make money. Because you don't take the regular price of a product to the bank. What you do is you take the money the consumer gives you, whatever they paid, to the bank. So you have to understand how dollars flow through the P&L. So first you have your top line and you're going to take out your promotional dollars. How much did you spend on discounts? And then you're going to take out your cost of goods sold. And then in grocery, which is a really hard thing for a lot of people to understand, by the time you just do that kind of math, you end up with a very, very low amount of money to work with. So what happens in grocery is most good grocers, well-controlled grocers, are making somewhere probably between 1% and 5% on the bottom line. So that's not a lot of money, and a whole bunch of that money is coming by way of vendor dollars in shelf allowances and promotional dollars and things like that. So when you look at that, you can really see the pressure in the P&L that marketing spend is under, right? Because everything is an expense line in the P&L. So you have to deliver value, and you have to make sure you're absolutely as efficient as possible. What that will typically mean in grocery is you start to examine the channels that you're using to go to market. How much are you spending in print? Because most grocery retailers are still doing a whole heck of a lot of print. And is it efficient? And can you start to move more into digital, right? To kind of ease up some of that pressure and continue to attract customers through the front door.
Well, that's really interesting. And for me, I have a lot more experience on the D2C side. So a thought with that as well is it could be important for marketers to understand, like, what is the hero product? What is the product that gets people in the door? And then where does that lifetime value come from in terms of what products should be focused in the email marketing efforts? What products should be focused in the SMS? That as well. Question for you, and this is honestly genuine curiosity that popped up. As I shared, I'm more D2C side, and I don't hear people talking as much about loss leaders in the D2C world, but I've heard that term thrown out in the brick and mortar and the grocery space as well. Is there any marketing or communication that gets done in terms of loss leaders to be able to drive sales for that with a core purpose? Is that a bad question?
I think it is a question that we talked a lot about 10, 15 years ago.
Okay.
It's less and less, I think, in the conversation today. And what's really driving what you're going to price a product at or which products you're going to feature are those products' ability to drive the door, or in e-commerce to drive the click to cart, right? Is this a product that a lot of people want and they're going to choose to shop my store if I have it at a great price? And then you look at your competitors. What are they doing? And that's really where you're going to set your price. And a lot of work has been done and continues to be done in terms of the analytics, the customer analytics in grocery, because margins are so tight, to understand what drives the door, what's an exciting price point that's going to get people in, and then how do you use merchandising in the store or online to get people to put other things in their cart. A great example of this is, and this year I don't know that they'll get there, but strawberries, 16-ounce strawberries at 99 cents was a huge door driver for us, and at one of the recent companies I worked for. And then as you started to understand the basket that was involved in that, so if you saw a customer who came in, bought strawberries, maybe they bought 4 packages of them, and then that's all they bought and walked out the door, yeah, we probably lost money on that guy. But if they came in, they bought a couple of things of strawberries, and then they bought chicken, and then they bought artisan bread, and then they went into the grocery aisle. That's the customer you want. That's the customer that you're trying to really connect with and engage with and get them to identify themselves through your loyalty program. And then you can start to move them across different parts of the store as well. So you want something that can drive trial and get people in, but you want to get those people connected and engaged really quickly, so you can make sure that you can drive them into other parts of the store or other parts of the website where you have the opportunity to make a little more margin.
So I imagine marketing is tying in with planogram design as well, or planogram planning, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. So how the store flows, like what's the first thing when people come into the store, what do they see? And by the way, there's a reason that many grocery stores, you come into bakery. There's a reason for that. Why? Because you get the smells of bakery, right? So it becomes a very sensory experience. Or you come in right down the throat of the store into produce because it's so bright and vibrant and really brings those freshness cues into the consumer. But yeah, there's a real art to understanding then how do you flow the store. And as you get into grocery aisles, where do you put bread? Where do you put, cleaning supplies? How do you move from one aisle to the next aisle? that makes sense for the consumer. I'll tell you just one of the things that we would hear, and I'm sure this is still true, is that when you reset a store, every once in a while you have to go in and reset. You have all kinds of new products, new categories, different things going on. You need to reset a store. You will almost inevitably get a huge outcry from the customers of that store. Go, you moved all my stuff around. Why did you do that? Right? Now, what they might end up doing is buying in a whole bunch of categories they never bought in before because they just hadn't seen them because they just walked right by them. But now they're in front of them again. But obviously, you know, who moved my cheese? It's a real trial for the shopper.
Yeah, I've experienced that myself going in and reset a store, but also been in a store that I shopped in after reset. Also, it's interesting to hear you talk about some things from a marketing perspective in retail. I have a background working in retail when I was much younger. Won't name the store, big medium box store, I guess you would call it, that I worked in. Had to move the drive aisles around and build the drive aisles and those types of things. So I could see how the planogram you would get every Sunday, I think it was Saturday or Sunday, to move the drive aisles around would play into what marketing was being done. One thing that I've asked myself since I had that job, and I've always wanted to ask somebody that, you know, has been at that level of marketing, where I worked at every Sunday, Sunday morning or Saturday night, I can't remember. We would get a big stack of wayfinders and then also or end cap toppers and then also a bunch of flyers to put on the aisles, because every Sunday it was a whole reset of sales and most of the store was on sale at all times. Can a business ever get away from that? If they get that deep into it, can they ever get away from being a sales-based company?
It probably depends primarily on their strategy and how much pain are they willing to endure, right? So I have worked at several places where we wanted to move away from print circulars, right? Print is dead. Print is dead. Print is not dead. Print is not dead. People still use print circulars, but it is changing. But we wanted to move away from print circulars, so we stopped them. And we did a controlled test where we took them out in some trade areas and left them in others. And what we found was we saw top line sales decrease between 7 to 11%. Now, if you were able to do a really good activity-based costing analysis on that, what we figured was it's probably about break even. You get rid of all that expense of the circulars themselves, obviously, but also the people like you who were sitting there on Saturday night with all this crap they had to deal with and resetting drive aisles and dump bins and end caps and stuff. And all of that costs money. The materials that were sent to you, the labor that you and your teammates used in the stores, all that kind of stuff costs money. If you could take all of that out, you could probably absorb 7 or 10% of a sales decline. But guess what? That is so painful. And if you're a public company, it's super painful because the analysts have no time for that. They don't want to hear about that. What they want to see is healthy top line growth, and then how you're working to make sure your margins increase. And of course, unfortunately, how much leverage you can get on labor. That was my personal favorite term. How can we leverage our labor more? Which usually meant how do we cut hours in the store, which is always a bad plan. But all too often it's a solution, I think, in many retail organizations.
Yeah, I experienced that as well. I did. Well, interesting to hear it from your perspective. I'm just getting flashbacks of different things from the retail time, clearing out the tops of the aisles and down stocking and all this different stuff that I did at the time, and I'm glad I don't do now, but appreciate everybody that does. That was a big store with a lot of small items, which is a very interesting thing to think about when it comes to organizing and restocking, because you have a lot of stuff you need to do. So we would always, I don't know if this is the right thing to do or if in marketing you all did this when you worked at different retail stores, but we'd always focus first on the top 2% of sales in terms of areas, and then, you know, replenish those or straighten up those and then go from there based off of that.
Yeah, I think it used to be that you wanted to have people like you in the stores who had a great intuitive, possibly data-driven understanding of where do you focus your efforts, right? I think that over time, it's been harder and harder to find those people because, as you know, retail turnover is amazingly high. And so there have been a lot of systems that have been put in place that really help store operators determine what's most important. What do I need to do first? What do I need to do second? How do I schedule that labor for stocking, for promotional displays, for cleanup, whatever those things are, cashiering, all those kinds of things. And a lot of the systems that have been developed are really good at doing that. And of course, they're based on individual operators' strategies about what's more important, right? Because you only have so many labor hours. But I think it's changed a lot in the years, the 6 months or so since you used to work in that particular retailer. So that it's much more of a science.
6+ years.
It's much more of a science now because labor is just so hard to get and keep that within a retail environment, and it's very similar, at least in my experience, in a warehouse environment too. So from a D2C standpoint, in those fulfillment facilities, right? You've only got so much labor that you can afford to have. So it's got to be super efficient how you allocate it and what you use it for. And it's all data driven now. And of course, the beauty of retail is there's a lot of data.
Well, and speaking of data, talking about performance marketing, talking about different types of marketing that can be done. Brighter Click, we're an agency that mainly focuses on DR, direct response or performance marketing, paid ads, right? Paid ad creative that way. So there generally needs to be a return associated with each action that we're doing, with each campaign we're running, with each creative that we're going that way. I've heard back and forth from community, and obviously my echo chamber is more towards the performance marketing side because that's what I'm in. But I'm just curious to hear when it comes to brand marketing and branding efforts and then direct response or performance marketing, would you say that those are two symbiotic things that tie into each other? Are they separate, and do you budget for them separately? How do you unpack that thought?
And I think it's two different questions. Yes, I believe they are connected and each side supports the other. I think you have to, if you have developed great brand awareness and have done a great job of communicating your brand promise to your target customers, the promotional side or the performance side is just going to be that much more efficient. It doesn't have to work as hard, right? You know exactly who you're going after, and they're more willing to consider, right? They're aware, they're more willing to consider and convert. So they work really well together. If you do brand marketing, and let's just call that more impressions based, I would say, and you don't do the performance based stuff, the action driving stuff, because in my mind, that's really what a lot of direct response and performance marketing is. You're measuring a very specific action you want the customer to take pretty immediately, right? So if you're trying to do brand marketing and not do any of the action stuff, well, I guess there are some brands who can get away with doing that. I don't know, Louis Vuitton comes to mind. But for most retailers, most direct to consumer, most e-commerce company, you have to have both. The consumer has to understand who you are in a brand, what your unique selling proposition is, and that makes the performance marketing work better. The performance marketing is actually driving the door, if you will.
And when it comes to reporting, when it comes to, rolling up performance and things such as that with brand marketing, is impressions the main concern? Or have you found normally in organizations, impressions was the main concern? Was there any other core metric or core KPI to tell if it's a good action or not?
Well, it kind of depends on the amount of the spend and the number of channels that you're in, right? So if you're doing network television buys, there are other things that you are going to measure. They're not typically as immediate as you would get with digital, with SEM or even SEO. You're going to look at your impressions. You're going to look at your gross rating points that were delivered. And you're also going to watch your measures of brand awareness and share of voice in the market. So those are all ways that you're kind of looking at whether your brand message gets across. And if I think really good marketers who have the advantage of a very rational world that they might be working in, they're also going to do a lot of, you would call it A/B testing. I would call it test and control markets, right? To understand whether did this advertising, did this messaging, whether it's television, radio, out of home, those traditional types of advertising, did they drive also an immediate action by the consumer? Did we see transactions go up? Did we see visits to the website go up, right? And those are the types of measures that you would look at in those more traditional channels. Although I will also tell you that out of home has gotten really, really good at being able to tell you exactly how many eyeballs saw a particular ad at a particular time, and then taking your data and doing pretty much the same thing that digital does and saying, hey, that drove a sale. This IP address came to your store because we track that device, right? So it's a little different from SEM, where you're looking at the action I want this person to take is I want them to click onto the website or preferably landing page. But then I want them to go through that journey, not just go to the landing page, right? That's good, yay. But if that's all they do, that's not driving a sale, right? So then they've got to take those next steps as well. And you need to be able to track all of those steps very discreetly to understand whether you're getting to the ultimate action you wanted to take, which is sale, to buy something.
Yeah, and to kind of reiterate what you were saying with the TV play. I know I've seen that with some brands, but what you're saying is don't focus on running it in all markets, pick a few key markets, and then make sure that you have store locations in those areas to see, or if it's a D2C website, use Google Analytics to see if you have impressions on or traffic to your website or sales from a certain market that you ran the TV ad in increase a week, 2 week, 3 weeks after the ad was run.
And then you can look at expanding that broadly out if you're national or multi-regional kind of a chain or a business, right? Because you don't want to spend all your money and then go, oh, that advertising didn't work.
Yeah.
You'd like to know, hey, you know what? It worked in these 2 or 3 test markets. Now we're ready to go national with it.
Yeah. And I know, marketing goes in waves, and, when Facebook ads were rising, everybody was moving away from traditional, going to that. Now there's a lot of D2C brands, A, wanting to go brick and mortar, but B, using things like Postpilot for direct mail, or doing out of home, or doing, what's the term I'm looking for? Like billboards, things like that to get traffic that way. So
again, I think that you're right. The pendulum swings back and forth about what's sort of popular to do, but the challenges are all the same, right? I need to build awareness of my brand. I need to communicate what it is that I offer to the consumer that's going to compel them to take an action that they otherwise wouldn't take. And what's the best way to do that? And ultimately, I think it is really integrating all of those channels together because they're going to work really well together. And by the way, as I said before, print is not yet dead, and direct mail certainly is not dead. If you know what you're doing with direct mail, if you have really good first-party data, and you can really slice and dice that data in terms of what's going to motivate which of your customers in your mail list, you can be very, very effective with direct mail. It can be, it's going to be more expensive on a per customer basis, but it's generally got much higher response rates than pure digital.
No, that's without a doubt. I've seen brands talk about some good results with direct mail that way, and I've definitely seen people moving towards that some. Well, just to kind of shift gears a little bit, I'm on the agency side. You are now doing your own thing, but you have a vast experience in-house at many different corporations, many different companies. As you've been a CMO at different companies, and you've likely hired many agencies to work with for different services that way, what are things from the CMO level that you're generally vetting or looking for when you're entertaining working with an agency?
What's their level of experience with what I want them to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if I need help with SEO, I want to know who else they've done SEO for. Is it in my category or something that is close to my category, so they understand the complexity of my business? A typical grocery store will have, I don't know, 100,000 SKUs in it. Well, how are you going to, where do you start with that? And so having an agency that understands your business because they've had experience with it, I think is really important. Cost is always a factor. I mean, I wish we could say it's not, but it always is a factor. I don't think I've ever been told, well, you have to take the lowest cost option, because obviously it's that blend of cost and great results that you want to get, right? So it's somewhere there in the middle. And I will tell you also, it's got to be people you like to work with. Because for most companies, you're going to spend a lot of time either in person, on the phone, on a call, with your agency people. Hopefully, talking about how great the results are. Yay, coming in on time, under budget, with overperformance. Those are the wonderful calls to have.
There's some keywords there: on time, under budget, overperformance.
Exactly. Or you're going to be wrestling problems to the ground, right? And for the CMO, if you've got something that's not working, or you're not achieving the results that the organization needs, you're on the line for that. The buck stops there. Well, it doesn't really, because then the CMO is going to pick up the phone and the buck is going to move over to the agency's desk to say, what's going on? How can we fix this? What happened? What's not working? Right? And so it needs to be people you can trust and you feel like you can have really open, honest conversations with. I think that's a real tough one to get to in agency relationships, right? Because they tend to be so transitory anymore, right? It's like, well, the clock's ticking. You've got about 3 months to make this work, Colby. Let's go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then on to a different agency. And I think that almost inevitably means that the client is going to end up with subpar results.
Mm-hmm.
They have to have some patience for their agency partners to understand the business, to become part of the business, and to really partner on it. If an agency that I'm working with doesn't want to know what my sales are every week, we probably got a problem there.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know what they are every day. And if it's a Black Friday business, I know what they are every hour, right? And I want people who are asking for that information or calling for that information. They want the reports. They want to know how it's going, and that you're going to spend time every week or a couple of weeks at most talking about how are we going to get it better.
Yeah, that communication piece is rare with agencies, and it's the most important piece, because you can't collaborate without that. And that 3-month timeline, which I feel like 90 days has become the standard for agency evaluation in terms of, is this working, at least from a performance agency standpoint. And it's always important during the sales process to set realistic expectations of what is possible. If you want a 3x return on ad spend, and you've only ever for the life of your business gotten a 0.5, fixing that in 90 days or less, I'm walking on water at that point. And like there needs to be some bonus incentive or something like that, right? So there just has to be some realistic expectations.
Well, chances are, if a client or would-be client is asking you for that and their historical is so far below that, mm-hmm. their problem is not their agency.
Yeah. And oftentimes it comes into, do you have an average order value that even makes sense for that? Right. Yeah. And it's just the I don't think wherewithal is the word I'm looking for, but just the eyesight on P&L to see those types of things. Like, where is the performance coming from, mm-hmm. or why are we not meeting the goals that we want that way?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that kind of conversation is really important
Mm-hmm.
to set expectations around.
Well, and last question for you before we go into our rapid fire questions at the end. From the agency perspective, yeah, rapid fire, you better be ready. From the agency perspective, when it comes to sales, you always hear sales coaches and people talking about like sort LinkedIn Sales Navigator for people that have moved into a new role in the last, I can't remember, like 3 or 6 months because they're in a new role. And internally, working with businesses, ones with small headcount, ones with high headcount, we've seen that, generally that first 3 to 6 months where a new decision maker for our department comes in is where churn could happen, or the highest likelihood of churn could happen, right? So we always, regardless of this, but always when there's somebody new coming on board, this decision maker, try to make sure we share a presentation deck with our historics and what we've done value-wise and what we're planning to do ahead, and just make sure we build that communication. Because from my perspective, when a new CMO or somebody comes in, their job is to turn performance around, and making changes is one of those indicators of that. Do you have any insights on that? Is that an accurate assumption that, the first 3 to 6 months with a new marketing decision maker is the highest churn opportunity for an external partner?
I would tell you that I think, well, it depends upon the level of change that's needed. I also said how high is the level of poop that you walk into, which will say a lot about, okay, how quickly do we have to move, what needs to happen. But I would tell you that within the first 2 weeks, 30 days of moving into a new role in a new company is I want the agency there. I want them presenting. I want them talking about, there would be, in my mind, you'd have a presentation with all of the partners on the client side there. And then we would have a private conversation about what are the obstacles and challenges that you guys have seen? What do we need to do better to be a better client? Unless the mandate when you came in is, by the way, we need a new agency in the next 30 days, right? But that usually isn't, because they will probably have the departing CMO fire you on the way out. But getting to understanding, because your agency has history. They know what's been going on. They know what has worked, what hasn't worked, and probably have a pretty good idea of why. And for me, going into a new role, I want to understand that. That's really vital input, right? Because you're a little bit out of the fray of that, right? That is whatever's going on inside. But then if we can't establish that level of communication and trust, we can't get things changed rapidly enough. Yeah, I would say within the first, it's probably going to be more like 91 to 180 days that you'll know as a CMO whether this agency is going to work out or not.
Yeah. Remind me to tell you something offline as well. I just had an idea about time and budget. Make a note. Time and budget wasted on retesting things that have already been done when new hires come in. I'm going to throw an idea past you. Yeah, it's I could see that being a common problem. But okay, rapid fire time for you here. As always, don't share these with you ahead of time. So just give us your first thought. If you had to summarize everything we discussed today into a marketing mindset, what mindset should marketers or business owners have?
They should be business owners. Marketers should be business owners. They're responsible for delivering financial objectives in the company. The way they do it can be very different, but they have to own that P&L.
I love it. And for anyone listening that is in the stage of figuring out what they'd like to do in the marketing industry, maybe graduating college or at a career change in their life, what marketing role or roles would you say will have the highest demand opportunity in the next 3 to 5 years?
There's no question that digital is increasingly important. And so learning everything you can about digital and staying very current with what all the digital opportunities and challenges are is key. But find opportunities that are going to allow you to be in the stores or be in the e-commerce business, in the call center, in the fulfillment center, because you need to understand the business. And then look for opportunities that allow you to see some of the more traditional types of marketing as well. I think digital people too often today or social media people too often get pigeonholed into that thing. And that thing is only this much of marketing, right? So yes, learn it, know it, keep current in it, but find the ways that are going to really increase your breadth of knowledge and your ability to be flexible.
Yeah, and I think as things like AI advance as well, the importance of having that diverse capability to make sense of multiple skills or multiple facets will continue to be important. Like I think media buyer or a specific tactical thing could eventually be replaced by AI, but the CMO decision maker, things like that, will still have a lot of need and growth opportunity as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, and last question for you, where can listeners connect with you and learn more about you and your business?
So, of course, they're welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn and also on my website, mconsultnet.com. There's a contact form on there, and that'll tell you a little bit more about what I do in my business. There's some very lovely, well-written blogs that I encourage everyone to read. Or you can send me an email at aparker@mconsultnet.com.
Well, Amy, this was a great episode. I appreciate you coming on today.